When a Sigma empath walks away, it's never impulsive, it's final. They don't leave because they stopped caring. They leave because they finally see things clearly after giving chance after chance, explaining, forgiving, and hoping for change. Something inside them shifts. And when that shift happens, there's no speech, no fight, no warning, just quiet detachment. The same heart that once cared deeply now goes silent, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because when a Sigma empath realizes that their kindness is being used as a weapon against them, they don't argue, they disappear. People never see it coming. They mistake empathy for weakness, patience for tolerance, and love for naivety. But what they don't understand is that the Sigma empath watches everything. They notice the lies, the manipulation, the subtle disrespect, and when the pattern repeats enough times, they stop explaining and start walking. And when they do, they don't look back because once an empath learns emotional detachment, they never unlearn it. The love remains, but the access ends. In this video, you'll discover why Sigma empaths walk away without warning, what really happens before they decide to leave, and why their silence after departure is the loudest message you'll ever hear. Before we begin, subscribe to Brainy Empath, like this video, and comment, "My silence is my closure." Because when a Sigma empath walks away, they're not giving up on love, they're returning to themselves. They've already tried everything. When a Sigma empath walks away, people often say, "I never saw it coming." But what they don't realize is the empath saw it long before anyone else did. They just kept hoping it would change. The grandpas don't leave easily. They stay long after most people would have walked away. They try every possible way to fix the relationship: communication, understanding, patience, forgiveness, even at the cost of their own emotional health. They believe in people's potential. They believe in healing, and that's why they hold on, even when it hurts. But over time, something shifts. The empath begins to realize that no matter how much they love, explain, or forgive, the other person doesn't want to grow. They keep repeating the same behavior, the same lies, the same neglect, the same lack of effort. And the empath starts to see that love alone can't fix someone who refuses to change. That realization is painful because for a Sigma empath, walking away doesn't mean they've stopped caring. It means they've exhausted every option. They've cried in silence, prayed for clarity, and convince themselves to stay one more time, again and again, until the emotional weight becomes too heavy to carry. They don't explode or argue when they finally decide to leave. They just shut down, quietly. The same person who once showed endless patience now gives nothing but calm indifference. It's not bitterness, it's acceptance. They understand now that staying would only keep them stuck in a cycle that's already proven itself. When they walk away, it's not out of weakness, it's strength, because it takes more courage to stop trying than to keep holding on to false hope. They're not giving up on love, they're choosing to stop bleeding for someone who keeps reopening the wound. And once that choice is made, they never look back, because deep down, they know they didn't walk away too soon. They stayed far longer than they should have. They recognize the pattern. For a long time, the Sigma empath gives people the benefit of the doubt. They believe that mistakes happen, that love can heal, and that patience will eventually make things right. But eventually something clicks. They start recognizing the pattern. It's not just one argument, one betrayal, or one disappointment. It's the cycle. The same promises followed by the same behavior. The same apologies that never lead to change. The same moments of connection that always end in confusion and pain. And once the empath sees that pattern clearly, everything changes. Sigma empaths are naturally observant. They read energy more than words. So when they start noticing that the energy never matches the intentions, when kindness turns into manipulation or affection turns into control, they can't unsee it. Their intuition starts ringing louder than their hope. And that's when emotional detachment begins. It doesn't happen overnight. The empath watches quietly, testing to see if things will improve. But every time the same pattern repeats, their emotional investment fades a little more. What used to make them fight harder now just makes them tired. What used to make them sad now makes them indifferent. That's the shift. People around them might not notice it, but internally, The Sigma empath is checking out. They're no longer listening to words, they're studying behavior. And when they realize that nothing changes because the other person doesn't want to change, they stop waiting for something that will never come. The moment the pattern becomes undeniable, the Sigma empath begins to prepare their quiet exit. There's no anger, no dramatic confrontations, just a calm understanding that staying means betraying themselves. Recognizing the pattern is their awakening. It's the moment they see that love without respect isn't love, and forgiveness without accountability isn't healing. And once they connect those dots, there's no going back. Because once a Sigma empath sees the truth clearly, they can never pretend they don't. They reach emotional burnout. A Sigma empath doesn't walk away because they stop caring. They walk away because they've reached emotional exhaustion. They've given so much of themselves that there's nothing left to give. Empaths carry other people's pain like it's their own. They absorb the tension in the room, the sadness in someone's voice, the heaviness behind words that go unspoken. They fix, comfort, and heal, even when no one asks them to. But that level of emotional labor takes a toll, especially when it's one-sided. The Sigma empath keeps trying to hold everything together, believing that if they just love harder or communicate better, things will finally change. But what happens instead is quiet depletion. They start feeling drained by the same conversations, disappointed by the same cycles, and invisible in the same ways. That's what emotional burnout feels like, loving so deeply that it starts to hurt. At first, they'll ignore the signs, headaches, anxiety, emotional fatigue. They'll convince themselves it's temporary. But eventually, they reach a point where they can't even feel the same emotions anymore. They go numb. And that's when the transformation begins. That numbness isn't coldness, it's the body's way of saying enough. It's the soul pulling the plug on a situation that's been draining for too long. The empath stops reaching out, stops explaining, stops trying to be understood. They realize that peace isn't found in fixing others, it's found in finally taking care of themselves. And once that burnout turns into clarity, they make their quiet decision. They don't announce it, they just walk away. Because when your heart has been stretched beyond its limit, healing can only begin in silence. The Sigma empath doesn't leave out of anger, they leave because they can no longer carry someone else's emotional weight while ignoring their own. They've cried, hoped, prayed, and fought for peace, but now they're ready to protect it. And that's when everything changes. Because when a Sigma empath reaches emotional burnout, they don't break down, they wake up. The day they stop explaining themselves. There comes a moment when the Sigma empath finally stops explaining, and it's not because they've run out of words, it's because they've realized the truth. People who genuinely care will understand without being convinced, and those who don't will twist every explanation into another weapon. For so long, the empath tries to make others see their intentions. I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to help. I only wanted peace. They over-communicate, over-apologize, and over-explain because they believe clarity will lead to understanding. But with toxic or self-centered people, understanding was never the goal. Control was. The Sigma empath eventually notices the pattern. Every conversation turns into a circle, their feelings get dismissed, their words get misinterpreted, and their empathy gets used against them. They realize that no matter how gently or honestly they explain, the other person isn't listening to understand, they're listening to defend. And that's when something powerful shifts. The empath chooses silence, not out of defeat, but out of emotional maturity. They stop arguing their worth. They stop trying to justify why they need peace, space, or respect. Because peace doesn't need justification, it needs protection. When a Sigma empath stops explaining, it confuses people who are used to manipulating them. Suddenly, their usual tactics don't work anymore. The emotional reactions they once relied on are gone. And that's when the empath's silence starts to speak louder than any words ever could. It's a quiet kind of power. The kind that doesn't need validation, attention, or approval, just stillness. Just clarity. The Sigma empath learns that not every battle deserves their energy, and not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Their silence doesn't mean they don't care. It means they've realized they don't need to prove their heart anymore. And once they stop explaining themselves, they stop bleeding energy into places that never deserved it. Because sometimes the most powerful statement an empath can make is no statement at all. They choose peace over attachment. One of the hardest lessons a Sigma empath ever learns is this: not everyone you love brings peace, and not every connection deserves to stay. For a long time, they confuse attachment with love. They hold on not because it's healthy, but because they believe walking away means giving up. But eventually they realize staying in chaos is the real form of surrender. The Sigma empath starts to see that peace isn't something you find in another person, it's something you create within yourself. And when someone keeps disturbing that peace, no matter how much love there is, the empath learns to let go, because they'd rather feel alone in calmness than surrounded by people who drain their soul. Attachment says, "Don't leave me." Peace says, "I'll be okay even if you do." That's the evolution of the empath. The moment they stop chasing connection at the cost of their sanity, they no longer need constant reassurance, attention, or validation to feel loved. Their sense of peace no longer depends on who stays or who leaves. When they finally choose peace, it confuses everyone who used to feed on their reactions. Suddenly, the empath isn't arguing, over explaining, or fixing things anymore. They're quiet, but not weak, detached, but not cold. Their calm becomes intimidating because it can't be controlled. This shift doesn't mean the Sigma empath stops loving, it means they start loving differently, more selectively, more wisely. They stop giving energy to people who turn peace into anxiety. They stop mistaking chaos for passion. And once they've felt the peace that comes from solitude, attachment loses its power over them completely. They learn that walking away isn't abandonment, it's self-respect. It's choosing inner balance over emotional survival. So when they walk away without warning, it's not revenge, it's healing. It's the moment the empath finally chooses peace over attachment. Because peace doesn't ask for permission, it simply replaces everything that doesn't align with it. They see through manipulation. The Sigma empath has a gift. They feel energy before they hear words. They can sense when something isn't right, even if everything sounds perfect. For a while, they ignore that intuition. They give people the benefit of the doubt, hoping their heart is wrong. But eventually, experience teaches them a lesson. When someone's words don't match their energy, believe the energy. That's how the empath starts seeing through manipulation. They begin to notice the small things, the tone changes, the guilt tripping, the emotional baiting that once worked so easily. They realize that every "you're too sensitive" or "you're overreacting" was never about peace, it was about control. At first, it hurts, because the empath doesn't want to believe that someone they cared for could play with their emotions. They remember all the times they stayed quiet just to keep the peace, all the times they forgave behavior that shouldn't have been forgiven. But one day, the truth becomes too loud to ignore. The empathy that once blinded them now becomes their clarity. Once they see the manipulation clearly, the dynamic changes forever. The same words that used to make them question themselves now sound hollow. The emotional hooks don't work anymore. And the person trying to control them begins to feel powerless, because the Sigma empath has stopped responding. When manipulation loses its effect, control dies with it. The empath stops defending themselves, stops justifying, stops explaining. They no longer feed the cycle. And that calm silence, that quiet confidence, terrifies manipulators. Because once an empath sees through you, you can never hide again. Their intuition becomes their armor. Their boundaries become unbreakable. This is the moment the Sigma empath transitions from the healer to the observer, from absorbing the pain to understanding it. They stop trying to save people who thrive on confusion. And when they finally see manipulation for what it is, they walk away not with anger, but with clarity. Because once a Sigma empath sees the game, they stop playing it. They outgrow their old identity. There comes a time when the Sigma empath realizes they've changed, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The version of themselves that once tolerated mistreatment, overgave, and constantly explained no longer exists. For most of their life, the empath's identity was built around helping others. They were the listener, the healer, the one who understood. They defined their worth by how much they could give, even if it left them empty. But after being drained, betrayed, and misunderstood too many times, something inside them begins to shift. The Sigma empath starts to see that empathy without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-destruction. They stop confusing people-pleasing with love, and they start realizing that not everyone deserves access to their heart. The same energy that once went into fixing others now goes into protecting their own peace. And this transformation doesn't happen loudly, it's subtle. One day they wake up and realize they're not drawn to the same people anymore. The conversations that used to excite them now feel empty. The need to explain, to be liked, to be understood, it's gone. They've evolved beyond the version of themselves who settled for emotional crumbs. This growth often confuses others. People who benefited from the empath's softness start calling them cold or changed, but what they don't understand is the empath didn't change out of bitterness, they changed out of wisdom. They've learned that protecting their energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. They've learned that saying no isn't cruel, it's necessary. And they've learned that walking away doesn't make them heartless, it makes them free. The Sigma empath doesn't seek revenge or validation anymore. They seek alignment. They've outgrown the version of themselves that chased love at the expense of peace. So when they walk away without warning, it's not rejection, it's rebirth. They're not running from who they were, they're stepping into who they were always meant to become. Because the truth is, the Sigma empath doesn't lose people. They simply lose the parts of themselves that once tolerated less. They understand silence is the final word. The Sigma empath eventually learns that not every truth needs to be spoken. Some are better expressed through silence, because silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. It's what happens when you've said everything that needed to be said and someone still chose not to listen. For years, the empaths tried to explain, fix, and express their pain, hoping someone would finally understand their heart. But when words keep falling on deaf ears, they realize something powerful. Silence is the only language left that cannot be twisted. When the Sigma empath goes quiet, it's not about revenge or control. It's about peace. They no longer need to defend their intentions or prove their worth. They stop chasing understanding and start valuing distance. Silence becomes their boundary, their closure, and their healing. And that silence speaks volumes. It tells the other person, you no longer have access to my energy. It says, you can keep your version of the story. I don't need to correct it. It declares, I've finally chosen myself. The Sigma empath's silence is not cold, it's sacred. It's the space where they reconnect with themselves, where they rebuild everything that was broken inside them. The same quiet that others interpret as indifference is actually peace, deep earned and unshakable. It's also the one thing manipulators can't handle, because silence can't be argued with, baited, or controlled. It takes away their power completely. The empath's calm detachment becomes their greatest form of strength. So when a Sigma empath walks away and says nothing, that is the statement. It's not unfinished business, it's closure in its purest form. No arguments, no goodbyes, just peace. Because silence isn't empty, it's full of truth. And once a Sigma empath learns that silence is the final word, they never waste another one trying to prove their value again. When a Sigma empath walks away, it's not because they stopped caring, it's because they finally learned to care for themselves. They gave everything, their time, their love, their energy, and in return, they were left empty. But silence taught them what words never could. Peace is more valuable than understanding. Walking away without warning doesn't mean they're heartless. It means they've reached a level of clarity where explanations are no longer necessary. They've accepted that not everyone deserves access to their energy, and not everyone can meet them at the depth they love from. The truth is, a Sigma empath never really leaves. They simply return to themselves. They go where peace lives, where honesty feels safe, and where love doesn't have to hurt. Their silence isn't a wall, it's a sanctuary. A reminder that the most powerful response is sometimes no response at all. So if you've ever had to walk away quietly, not out of hate, but out of self-respect, remember this: your silence isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of your healing. You don't need closure from people who created confusion. You don't need validation from people who couldn't see your worth. You already have everything you were looking for within yourself. If this message spoke to you, subscribe to Brainy Empath, like this video, and comment, "My silence is my peace." Because when a Sigma empath walks away without warning, they're not disappearing, they're finally coming home.